I am Gregory Hallows, and this is Preserve Halloween Podcast. So welcome back to the show. On this episode, we're setting aside the haunted houses and jack-o'-lanterns that we normally talk about for something a little different, but not really, because as you know, the podcast is about how things tie to Halloween, and that's what we're going to do. When you peel back the dice rolls, character sheets, and campaigns of Dungeons & Dragons, which, by the way, this was suggested to me to do as a podcast, so I wanted to make sure I've fulfilled that person's wish. When you peel back that, you find the same elements that make Halloween endure: monsters, imagination, mystery, and a ritual of stepping into another world, much like our beloved Halloween. Candles will burn low, dice gleam like bones under firelight. In the flicker of candlelight, a group will gather. Dice will tumble across a table. Maps are spread, monsters wait unseen, and friends lean close, whispering plans in the dark. Beyond the table, the imagination stretches into dungeons and haunted castles, where shadows move and monsters wait. For many, this is just a game. For others, this is a ritual. A doorway into folklore, myth, and fear, a ritual that has its roots in the same soil as Halloween itself. And for a lot of people that play Dungeons and Dragons, these games can go on for years. Many friendships have been formed playing Dungeons and Dragons. The story of Dungeons and Dragons began in the early 70s when a group of imaginative gamers decided to move beyond toy soldiers on a battlefield and pull from the deep wells of myth and folklore many of the same creatures that populate Halloween decorations every October 31st. Also crawl through the pages of the Monster Manual, the guidebook, the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. And when players gather, they summon these beings back to life, just as Halloween summons the dead in ritual and costume. When creating this new sensation, this new game called Dungeons and Dragons, I'm going to say this wrong, so I apologize. Gary Gygax, I butchered it, I'm sorry. And Dave Arneson asked a simple question: what if instead of armies, you controlled one character? And what if instead of just winning or losing, you told a story? That was the basis for Dungeons and Dragons. When I played as a kid, I just liked creating characters. I didn't really like playing the game. I loved the character sheets. I just like making new guys. That's also funny. That's funny enough. That's my favorite thing about video games. Sports games, I like creating a character. So anyway, that was their basis. From that moment, the floodgates opened. Players could become wizards. They could become rogues, fighters, clerics, all kinds of things. They would battle dragons, negotiate with goblins, explore cursed ruins. But here's the thing. These monsters that they faced weren't just invented from scratch. They came from folklore and, history, like we said. They were drawn from the same myths, same fairy tales, ghost stories that fueled Halloween for centuries. One example, take the vampire, right? Dungeons & Dragons codified vampire as a monster with hit points, powers, anybody that plays knows all that. But behind these statistics also is centuries of folklore, pale figures hunting graveyards, rising from their tombs to drink blood. This same creature that appears in Halloween decorations in film and costumes, the vampire has traveled from folklore to Halloween to the DnD manual and back again. So, very suitable character, right? Here's another one, the Leech, Lich, probably another word I'm saying wrong. This was a word popularized by Dungeons & Dragons, but it was drawn from older traditions of wizards who sought to escape death, becoming skeletal, spell-wielding horrors. They are, in essence, just really amped up, souped up Halloween skeletons with grimoires instead of grins. The spooky, scary skeletons. And of course, witches, which is very prevalent in Dungeons and Dragons, and they appear in many guises. They could be hags with twisted powers. They could be crones of the swamp. They could be, always whispering bargains, doing, all the witchcraft stuff. Witches are a good character. But their roots are the same as Halloween's witches, with broomsticks, cauldrons. Every time a player confronts a witch, they're tapping into centuries of fear around female power, transformation, and the supernatural. And those are just a couple of reasons why Dungeons & Dragons feels so Halloween adjacent. Halloween gives us costumes, masks, a night to pretend, and Dungeons & Dragons gives us character sheets and dice, but the rituals are the same. We become someone else. We walk into the shadows. We dare to face the monster. All of that is the same for Dungeons & Dragons and Halloween. So there is definitely a tie. But there's also something about the ritual. The whole ritual of both of these. But for Dungeons & Dragons, you got a group sitting together. You have a dungeon master who's spinning their tales in a real, cool voice. All the players are, clutching their character sheets. The dice is rattling like bones in a crypt. Playing Dungeons & Dragons feels ancient. And in a way, it pretty much is, because it's storytelling at its finest. Before there were these games, before there was Dungeons & Dragons, before there was rule books, people told stories around the firelight, around campfires, folklore, myths, cautionary tales. All of this stuff is, the age-old tradition of storytelling. Halloween is a descendant from those fireside traditions, but so is Dungeons & Dragons. Storytelling at its finest, and very, very, very creative. But let's not forget the atmosphere of both. Let's just imagine, it's almost time, and I'm very excited. October's coming very fast. But so picture your Halloween night. There's jack-o'-lanterns. There's a haunted house down the street. Everybody's screaming and laughing and having a wonderful time. Now, imagine Dungeons & Dragons. These kids sitting around the table, or adults, or whoever. Lights are dim. The music's low. Your DM is describing what's happening in the game. Creak of a coffin, or the whisper of a ghost, or what's going on. They're painting that picture, and these are both performances of fear, both communal and cathartic. So it's a very close tie, right? So just like Halloween, though, let's talk about the bad part for a second. Just like Halloween, Dungeons & Dragons has always had its critics. In the 80s, satanic panic swept across America. The game was being accused of promoting witchcraft, promoting devil worshiping. It was even, accused of making people go mad. Parents and churches warned children to stay away from it. Just like Halloween, a lot of people want to bring up the things that they believe are true. One of the best instances of this, go watch the Halloween episode of King of the Hill. One of the best, one of my favorite episodes of one of my favorite shows. But just like Halloween has been condemned over the centuries as a night of evil, same with Dungeons & Dragons. It got told there was even what was that movie with Tom Hanks? I can't remember. Somebody tell me. Send me a message. There was a movie with Tom Hanks early in his career. Maybe it was even his first movie, but it was about Dungeons & Dragons and what could bad happen. Fear of the unknown has always followed rituals, and it's often the very thing that makes these traditions endure. Some believe Dungeons & Dragons was dangerous. By rolling dice and pretending to cast spells, you were opening doors to real evil, real darkness. Much the same way Halloween has been accused of devil worship, corruption, all kinds of stuff. So there's always going to be skeptics. There's always going to be somebody that thinks something's bad. People feared Dungeons & Dragons because it allowed imagination to run into dark places, but that's why people love it. The same way people like to carve pumpkins or walk through haunted houses. Both of these things are just safe harbingers, or safe containers of fear. Halloween lets children flirt with the macabre through candy and costumes and being around monsters and all that stuff. And D&D lets players go to dungeons and emerge as a victor, as a champion. Or at least, they're still alive. It's not real. Fear of the unknown often breeds more fear. That's kind of just human nature. So D&D became part of America's moral folklore, just as Halloween has always. People like to talk about it, and sometimes it's misunderstood, but it still endures. These Dungeons and Dragons and Halloween are sometimes irresistible to people, right? So let's look at the parallels and, look at the dungeons themselves. A dungeon in the game is essentially a haunted house. There's narrow corridors, there's flickering torchlights, there's doors that creak open into the unknown. Sometimes you find treasure. Often there's a monster. It's the same feeling you can get walking through a haunted hayride, or riding through a haunted hayride or haunted house, a Halloween maze. Like, you have that fear of dread, but also like the anticipation of knowing there's going to be a jump scare soon, or knowing something's about to happen. Like that's a huge a rush. The difference is in D&D, the walls are imagination, but that fear is still in your head. It's still just as real. And a lot of people love that. So Halloween gives us a chance to live another life for one night. We put on the mask, we put on the costume, we become someone else, and it's fun, right? D&D lets us live another life for a campaign, whether it's just, one night, 1 hour, 1 year, multiple years. I mean, like I said earlier, campaigns can run for a long time. But both are timeless. There are human need for fear, for fun, for fantasy. People crave these things. To step outside yourself, if only for just a moment, and enter a world where magic and monsters are still, they're still there. They're real. That's fun. And then, the part that a lot of people do it for, Halloween, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever, the community involved. Trick-or-treating is a group ritual. Trick-or-treating, in theory, should involve your entire community, even though, a lot of us, we don't get that. Haunted houses are for groups. They're more fun when you have a group of people. D&D, you play it in groups. You never, you can't play alone. You have to have more than one person. The power of the story and the fear that is amplified when you share it with others is mesmerizing. Around Halloween, we can, have a bonfire and around on D&D or around a table. The effect is the same. We face the shadows together, and we also laugh, and we also are scared, and all this stuff is as a group. So, since the 70s and the 80s, when it became, huge, D&D's become a cultural phenomenon. There's been movies. It's still going strong. It's influenced video games and books and movies and art and all this stuff. But at the heart of the core of it, it remains what it always has been. It's a way to bring myth and folklore to life. And that's my favorite part about almost anything, is the history and the folklore and the myths and all that involved and related to it. And that's, one of the reasons I still do this podcast, because I love learning about all this stuff. So isn't that what Halloween is? Halloween is folklore revived once a year in the form of costumes and pumpkins and stories and, ritual. And it's just the best. So the next time you see a table where friends are rolling dice and, drawing maps or playing D&D, next time you see a group of kids in costume on Halloween night, this is all the same tradition. This is our ancient and historic and primal need to tell stories, to face monsters, to preserve this ritual of storytelling in, whatever form it is now. And it's just going to last forever. So let's all go back to that table. Let's all go back to rolling the dice, and, the dungeon's waiting for us. The dragons are roaring. Somewhere outside the window, it's going to be soon. October winds will stir leaves across your porch. 2 rituals. One is old. Halloween is hundreds, thousands of years old. Dungeons and Dragons, not so much, but they're both tied together with the need to imagine the dark and imagine these stories, to dress up in masks and face monsters and preserve this tradition of storytelling. That's the whole thing. Always preserve. Always, like, that's my whole thing. Always preserve all of this stuff. So that was my brief, chaotic podcast about Dungeons and Dragons and Halloween. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I pretty much rambled on and on and on, and I loved it. So until next time, stay strange, stay curious, stay spooky, and always preserve Halloween.